What's up guys, welcome to this review of Motherless Brooklyn, written and directed by Edward Norton, also starring Edward Norton as a detective, sleuth, private investigator who after the death of his mentor tries to figure out what his mentor was up to, what case was he following, who killed him, why, how did it all go down. That's the central mystery of this film. The setup starts off really quite well, the actual mystery is intriguing and interesting. There are some really good detective mystery elements in this film. So at times it's really engrossing, and overall what did I think of the film? Basically I thought it was just okay. The film has some great moments, but it has some really bad moments as well. And then the really bad things about the film are totally fixable. There were things here which did not need to be as bad as they were. That just another draft of the script or another go through on the edit could have solved a lot of the problems here. And I'll get into that into a little bit. But this is based on a book that was written in the 90s, I believe, which was also set in the 90s. Yeah, Edward Norton's went and changed the setting to 1950s, and I think it works really well, actually. That way it evokes very like noir films of like the 40s and 50s. It feels like an old-fashioned mystery noir movie, and Edward Norton's done a really good job here of changing the setting, making the book and the story and the characters all feel and fit into this time period. So I have to praise him on that. But the problems are to do with the film's length and with the pacing. The film is too long, but plain and simple. It's 2 hours 25 minutes altogether. It should have been less than 2 hours long altogether. There are tons of moments which could have been cut out. There are a bunch of moments that could have been condensed down and simplified and just really amped up the pacing a bit, because at times it's really slow and unnecessarily slow. Unnecessarily so, because at times it feels like there's next to nothing happening, and I feel like if you condense things down, simplified things, it would have also made the story at times less convoluted than it needed to be. There are a few too many characters, I think, and a few too many elements where there are just characters talking about other characters and you're having to try and remember, right, who's this that they're talking about, who's that, right, how's this person related. There's a lot going on here at times, and I feel like they just could have simplified things a bit. But beyond that, it's got some really good dialogue. Again, the book was written in the 90s, set in the 50s, so I imagine some of this dialogue has been changed and switched around a bit. And it works really well. It feels very suiting for the time period. There's some good use of comedy in there as well, so it's not deadly serious all the way through. But in relation to how long the film is, I wouldn't be surprised if this is almost a word-for-word retelling of the book, just changing the time period. Because, again, a lot of this could have been cut out. And then, sadly, after 2 hours 25 minutes, the ending I found to be a bit disappointing and anticlimactic. Not going to say how it ends exactly, but it feels like there was a lot of build-up to get all the answers you want, and then they give you the answers, and then that's kind of it. There's very little actual resolution going on in this film, and it was just really disappointing. So, this is the case of where the journey is actually better than the destination, in my opinion. But to talk about some of the characters, Edward Norton, of course, is the main character in here. Hey, it helps that you know the director. But great performance from Edward Norton here. He's playing a detective with Tourette's, and he's socially awkward at times. He does a really good job of it. I think he does a really great job at normalizing the elements of his character. So the fact that he has got Tourette's, the fact that he is socially awkward, everyone around him just seems to accept it as it is, and he does a good job of normalising it. It never feels like he's going too far, making it like taking the mick out of it, basically. There is an issue there where I'm going to get into it later on, but I do admire his approach to this and how he has normalised it and made it seem acceptable. And because of that, he's a very likeable, very charming lead character. The other characters, Gugu Mbatha Raw, is that how it's pronounced? I'll just call her Gugu. Great actress, good role here. The problem with her role is that she starts off being this elusive character who you just kind of see here and there. Then you dive into her a bit more, but she continues to have information that's hidden from her, and that goes for a lot of the characters in here. Because of the detective noir style thing about them, there's a lot of things about these characters which are just hidden from us, and for a lot of the film, they remain hidden. So by the end of the movie, Gugu is essentially a damsel in distress. So she goes from being mysterious to being developed to then falling into stereotype a bit, which is a bit disappointing. But the villains of the film, I like the introduction of the villains. The villains, when they're introduced, are really interesting and fascinating. And I'm not going to say who the villain is. That's kind of half the point of the film here, is trying to figure out who's really the bad guy. And the problem is, again, by the end of the film, they're falling into stereotypes. They're just bad guys for the sake of being bad guys. And that's, again, disappointing. But great performances. So, one of the biggest things about the characters here is, that I've already touched on this, is Edward Norton's character has Tourettes Syndrome. And he's socially awkward. There's a bunch of things going on with his character. The problem is that the way in which he normalizes Tourette's Syndrome, the way in which he makes it acceptable and fine and makes it just like, yeah, he has this, so what, move on. A lot of the characters in the film do treat it like this. It's like, right, oh, this guy, he's got something wrong, that's clear with him, just accept it and move on. That's great. Problem is, this is set in the 50s, not 2019. And the way that the film treats this is a very 2019 thing. The way that all the other characters treat it is a very 2019 thing. I find it hard to believe that someone in the 50s said someone with Tourette's who's twitching and who's blurting out certain comments and phrases here and there. I don't think anyone in the 1950s would have been quite as accepting of it. There's only really one or two instances in the whole film where someone clearly is like disturbed or surprised or freaked out by this, and it's always like a small character in the background or something, never one of the main characters. So yeah, again, I praise Edward Norton for trying to normalize it and making it acceptable. It just doesn't quite fit into the time period that he's setting up here. And I mentioned how there's good comedy in the film. One of the more uncomfortable elements is that the Tourette's is the source of a lot of the comedy, and I'm struggling to say whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing. Is it acceptable? I don't know. Because is he making fun of it? I don't think he is making fun of it. I think he's just finding the light side of it, and I think he is trying to, again, by making the jokes about it and bringing up certain funny instances, I do think he is also helping normalizing it and make it an acceptable thing. But he's never like doing a joke about Tourette's and saying, haha, look at that Tourette's. It's always a case of, oh, he's doing something odd and quirky. Yeah, the natural response is to laugh or to giggle or smile or whatever. So I don't think he goes quite as far as to take the mick out of it. But it is one of them things that's really like an iffy area of the film, and I'm not entirely sure about it. But again, even if he is, for the time period in which the film is set, it makes sense. But is it acceptable? I don't know. So to talk about the production side of things, it's set in the 50s. It evokes 1940s and 50s movies, very noirish, good use of lighting and setting and so on. Sets the mood and tone really well. That's all great for the most part. There are certain instances where characters are wearing certain costumes, and Edward Norton's hairstyle and certain uses of lighting where I was taken out of the time period a bit. It was really odd. I can't remember the last time this has ever happened when watching a movie, but there are certain elements here and there where I was like, is this really set in the 50s? Obviously it is, but it didn't feel or look like it quite as much as it could have or should have. And it's just little things like costumes, the fact that he's wearing like a turtleneck jumper, and the fact that he has got a more modern hairstyle compared to everyone else in the movie. It just felt a little out of place at times. And how you've got certain shots where they're using like browns and oranges in the colour motifs, and then there are other ones where it's really bright, and it just feels like, right, this is more modern than what this bit was. Why is that? And it just felt a little odd. But for the most part, the use of sets and locations and so on works pretty well, for the most part. But Edward Norton, I believe this is his first time directing, first time writing. I could be wrong. Maybe he's done a little thing here and there before. But either way, you can tell that this isn't something that he's used to doing. It's not something that he does often, at the very least. One of the hardest things for any writer to do is to learn how and why you need to cut certain material. And heading forward, if he continues to direct and write, he needs to get someone who's not a yes man. He needs to get someone to say, right, you need to trim this bit out, you need to cut this bit down. You can't just be overindulgent making a 2.5 hour movie that's word for word for like the book, which I don't know if it is word for word for the book. But again, the big problems here is that it is too long, it is too slow at times, and it didn't need to be. You could have cut some of the stuff out, you could have simplified some of the stuff, made it less than 2 hours long, and it would have been a great film. But one of the things which he does do really well as a director is the acting. He gets great performances across the board from pretty much everyone. And that's what I thought of Motherless Brooklyn. I'm going to go into one little spoiler point in just a bit. So if you haven't seen the film, go watch the film, come back and watch the rest of this. But before you do that, let me tell you that you should subscribe to my channel. If you like this content and you want more content like this, subscribe. It's really encouraging and I really appreciate any sort of support you want to give me. Leave your questions, comments and thoughts and opinions down in the comment section down below. And of course go over to Twitter and Instagram, follow me at @the_Grant Burton for all of my latest thoughts and opinions on whatever the hell is going on in my life. And until next time, thanks for watching. But now, time to go into full spoilers. I've only really got one point to say. So at the end of the film, I mentioned earlier how it felt a little anticlimactic and the resolution wasn't all that satisfying. It isn't. Basically, he just resolves to saying, hey, I can't win this situation. I'm going to sit down with the bad guys and let them just tell us what's going on because I need these answers. And say, right. So they're going to get away with it. Sort of. He does hand off the stuff to the reporter to write up all about it and so on. But then that's the case, right, well, if you do this, that means there's something happening after the film that's going to negatively affect you. Why aren't we seeing that? Is that going to be a sequel? I doubt it. But it feels like they're setting up something that we're never going to actually see. And that setup is way more interesting than what's actually happening here at the end. So it was odd. But it ultimately meant that the good guys didn't really win. Or they kind of sort of did in a way. But the bad guys essentially get away with it. And it's not until after the end of the film that they're actually going to get their comeuppance. So again, disappointing. Especially when you've got a 2.5 hour build up to get all these answers, and that's how it's resolved. Also, what's his relationship with his co-workers at this point? Because the last time we see Edward Norton and Bobby Cannavale, they're fighting each other to the point where it looks like Bobby Cannavale is actually trying to kill him. And yeah, is he still working with them? Are they friends? Are they getting along? Is there some sort of understanding between them? We don't know. That's the last time we see Bobby Cannavale or any of his co-workers. And yeah, God only knows whether or not he's still a detective or if he's still working with them or what's going on in his life at the end of the movie. All we know is that he gets the answers he wants and he moves on. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Motherless Brooklyn. I thought it was just okay. It could have been really a lot better. And there are some great moments in there. Until next time though, I hope you've enjoyed this review. Thanks for watching.